Mike Mallon, welcome to the Preconstruction podcast.
Thanks, Gareth. Appreciate you having me on.
Wonderful. Looking forward to diving straight into this. For anybody who doesn't know Mike Mallon, he's Director of Preconstruction at Suffolk in Boston, but specifically over the mission critical department. So looking forward to getting into all things data centers and mission critical. But let's bring it back to where it all started. Talk to me about the little boy in Mansfield High School. Was it always construction for you?
Yeah, in some ways, it was engineering, I would say. I grew up with a lot of family members that not only were in the trades, working here in the city of Boston, but with engineers in the family as well. So, with that and the strong math and science background, I went to Northeastern University here in Boston and pursued a civil engineering degree. But through the co-op process, including one at Suffolk or two at Suffolk, I was able to kind of find my true love in the construction management industry.
Brilliant. Yeah. You might have been like me, Mike, when I left high school or secondary school, as it called in Ireland. I didn't really know what to do. And I took guidance from my parents, my mentor, my employer at the time, and they pushed me towards electrical engineering. Now, it's transpired that I didn't work in the space. What was the thinking behind the civil side?
Yeah. So for me, I've always been a visual learner, someone that wants to touch, look, feel, and civil engineering, whether it be roadways or building structures or things of that nature, is very tangible. It's very visible. So when you build something within the civil engineering discipline, there's a finished product that you can actually look at and go see and understand how it is functioning in the real world space. So for me, that tangible asset that you create at the end is the biggest driver. And although some of the other types of engineering do have those tangible assets, a lot of them start to tend to get more into the theoretical and things like that. So it was always seeing that end product, seeing that building, that bridge, that dam, that roadway. That's what always interested me.
Yeah, it's that satisfaction, isn't it, to be able to say you were involved in something. Talk to us about Northeastern University now. Something I always like to kind of drill down on is the program. Did that engineering program, did they have any like pre-construction estimating modules, or was it purely on the ops side?
No, so we did have some pre-construction and engineer estimating modules. So early on at Northeastern, probably like any other college, it's all the general education and general engineering that you go through. But as you get later into your degree and studies, they allow you to start to specialize into your specific discipline. Construction management at Northeastern is one of those disciplines you can specialize in. So I was able to take some pre-construction and estimating courses, some scheduling courses, even some, business type courses where we learned a little bit about different contract types and things of that nature. So they did a really nice job of kind of giving you that introduction to the construction industry. And, that was really helpful in kind of giving me not only a head start, but helping me understand that this is what I want to do.
Love it. Nice and broad. That's one thing that I've been an advocate for. Obviously, the Pre-Construction podcast, I don't believe that enough of the programs are concentrating on the BIM VDC, the scheduling, the pre-con, the estimating. So it's good to hear that Northeastern are doing that. And another thing that stood out to me is your co-ops. You were a project scheduler at Suffolk for a time, then you went and worked on the facilities department within Northeastern University as scheduling. Was that just what was available at the time, or did you specifically want to have a look and test yourself on scheduling?
So for the first opportunity that I had at Suffolk, that was the available co-op at the time, and was the opening in the door that I could apply to for a co-op at Suffolk. So, for me being, a young engineer and having never worked in the true construction industry before, I just took any opportunity I could. That scheduling internship was with Donna Nardella, who is now our national director of scheduling and planning within Suffolk. She's still here. I sit 100 feet away from her here in the office, and her and I keep in touch. But I learned from her. She taught me the ins and outs of Primavera P6, so I am able to use the tool as needed. I learned how to do anything from a proposal RFP schedule, which is what I see most of nowadays in pre-con, but working on schedule updates on active projects, baseline schedules for projects in development, as well as, schedule analysis and things like that. So I learned some really great skill sets on more the analytical side of scheduling in that first co-op, but it also helped me build relationships at Suffolk. I got to meet a lot of different people and kind of start to get a sense and taste of what I might want to do here in the industry.
Love it, because I'll be honest with you, Mike. We're 116 episodes in, and you're the first person to do a scheduler co-op. So I'm really looking forward at the end of this podcast for the people listening. We're going to get into the pre-construction, how scheduling and pre-construction marry nicely together. Because we did, and I mentioned this prior to recording, we did do, and we are doing a mini series in scheduling. I just see it becoming such a big part of pre-construction and in the overall project. So we're seeing it popping up in all of the E&R top 400 GCs scheduling as a department.
Absolutely. And I will say Suffolk does a really great job. We always have a few scheduling co-ops from our schools here in Boston, whether it be Northeastern or Wentworth or some of the other schools in the area. And there are so many people here at this company, including folks that work within my team here in Precon, that had that scheduling co-op as their first opportunity in the industry. And it just speaks volumes having that background, that there are sometimes that it provides you an advantage as a young person and someone that's up and coming to have all that background, to know how a P6 schedule comes together, to understand scheduled logic. It's an invaluable tool to have in your kind of reservoir there. So repertoire.
Yeah, and you said it earlier as well. I mean, one of the schedulers, a regional director of one of the top firms, he said it's like navigating the project, almost like steering the project. He says it's one of the best kind of insights you will get to construction, because you know yourself, when you go on site and you've only done pre-construction, the sites guys look at you going, you don't really know what's happening out here, but a scheduler sees it all.
Yep, absolutely. And as it, specifically pertains to pre-construction, all that fine detail that you put into a schedule, as far as, actual work activities and handoffs and constraints and things like that. If you don't have a sound pre-construction schedule where you're establishing bidding timelines, GMP timelines, owner approvals, procurement, everything like that, all that work that you put in at the back end of the schedule, it's going to fall apart. It's all dependent on that first, call it 30, 60, 90 days and how you build that out.
Yeah, it seems, and I don't. It seems like it's very like pre-construction estimating. It's high workload, and you need to have a high capacity for information, and then to be able to dissect it, use the right information to come to the right conclusion.
Absolutely. There's so many moving parts and pieces in pre-construction, from, as I mentioned earlier, bidding to GMP deliverables to buyout to procurement to submittals, RFIs, things like that. If you're not tracking all that data up front and you're not getting that fine detail into the schedule, it's going to show itself later on. So it's extremely important that my team works with our scheduling and planning department, as well as our senior leaders on the projects, to make sure that all those parts and pieces are in the schedule early on and are properly sequenced and logicked and tied to those later on construction activities.
Brilliant, love it. And then once you finished up in the co-op, straight into Suffolk, project engineer, APM, PM, senior PM, and now over the last 8 months, director of pre-construction for the Mission Critical. How valuable was your field experience and your career during the field? It was healthcare, then Mission Critical.
Yeah, I think I benefited extremely greatly from being, hands-on on projects, starting with the Career Star program here at Suffolk, which is a, top of the industry program, where I spent 2 years rotating from field in an assistant superintendent role, PM in an assistant project manager role, and then estimating in an assistant estimator role. I was able to really gain the basics of all those 3 different skill sets in a 2-year period. And no matter what path I took, I started with the project management path. Those skill sets I learned out in the field and in estimating helped me be a better project manager And now that I've pivoted back to pre-construction, I'm now relying on some of those basic skill sets that I learned in that program as a foundation. So it really is important to get out there. I've had the opportunity to travel around the country and run my projects at the site level for those opportunities in the mission critical group. And again, being there in person, in the trailer every day, out on the job site every day, I think it helps you grow so much faster because you're there experiencing it. If you're back in an office and remote from the job site, you're missing on so many of the details and so much of that knowledge, that inherent knowledge that you could pick up at a job site.
Brilliant. And you picked some of the most complex industries to work in, the healthcare and mission critical. Let's focus on mission critical now. When you first were told, right, we're going to put you on a mission critical project, what was your thoughts? What did you think mission critical and data center construction was about?
Well, I'll tell them the story because I didn't know it was mission critical when it first came up. So, I got a call from one of our COOs at the time who said, "Hey, Mike, we've got this project. We're looking for a young, up and coming project manager to take on the challenge. And, we want to give you that opportunity. You've been doing a great job as an assistant project manager over on our healthcare side. So what do you say?" And I said, that sounds great. Unbelievable. And they're like, "All right, so it's actually not for a healthcare project. It's for mission critical, which are data centers. You'll learn more about that later. And it's in Buffalo, New York." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And they were like, "Yeah, and we need you out there in a month." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So that's how I came into mission critical. I had no idea, and I was aware of what a data center was. Just living in the world we are living today. I knew they existed, but I had no idea the extent and the reach. And kind of jumping headfirst into this project with Charles McCarthy, our national COO. Who was getting the group started up at the time, I really learned a lot, not only from managing my own project for that 6 to 8 months, but also learning from Charles, learning about the industry, learning about just how big this sector was and what his plan of growth was for mission critical at Suffolk. So it was a major education because, health care is technically complex, really heavy MEPs, particularly on the mechanical side. You have some really complex cooling systems and ventilation systems in a hospital, as you can imagine, and within lab space within that hospital. But switching over to mission critical, yes, we have mechanical systems that are complicated, but the electrical systems just went to a whole nother level of technicality. And it was a fun challenge, and I've learned a lot in these many years, and I'm still learning every day. There's tons of innovation pouring into this industry to keep up with the demand and efficiencies, and it's been a really great ride from that crazy starting point.
I love it. And Mike, believe it or not, it's a common theme that we see from, and this was my next question, for people that have grown very quickly throughout the ranks. I mean, you graduated in 2016, you're already at director level. Was it putting your hand up to the unknown? Was that one of the key things that you can kind of look back and go, yeah, that was a time where my career really took off?
Yeah, absolutely. And I happened to, I had the introduction made to me by the former COO at the time. But it was, without realizing it, it was Suffolk's first mission critical project, right? So I was able to get in. It was $1.5 million project, tiny little thing, but I was able to get in at the very beginning, and I made that commitment to get outside of my comfort zone. I grew up around Boston. I went to school in Boston. I took a job with the biggest GC in Boston. So my life was very Boston centric, and it took me raising my hand, stepping out of my comfort zone, taking the journey out to Buffalo, New York, and really experiencing, what it would meant to stand alone and run a project and be in the mission critical space. And with that has come further opportunities. So as we've grown and I've made that commitment to stay, and I've done a fair bit of travel, over these last 8 years or so, all around the country, Buffalo, upstate or central Washington State, Pacific Northwest, Oregon, California. it's allowed me to continue growing at a pace with the group. So, happy to share, at this point, for our upcoming fiscal year that we're now in, we're looking at doing over 1.2 billion in revenue. So again, 6 years ago, we were at $1.5 million. We're now at 1.2 billion. So with that growth and me sticking around and staying up to the challenge, it's afforded me verticals that I never could have foreseen in at the beginning, when I first started in 2016.
Absolutely. I mean, that's unbelievable growth and it's brilliant, but it just shows you when you get in at the right time with a company in hyper growth, your career rank can really take off. And then with data centers specifically, you've obviously done a number of them on the operations side. You're now on the pre-con side. Tell me, what are the biggest challenges building a data center? We see them popping up everywhere. I mean, it seems like every tech company is looking for a million square foot or 250 by 4. It's really taken off. But how complex are they, and what are the big challenges?
Yeah. So you just nailed it. It's everybody's looking to build as big and as fast as possible. So depending on the client, you might see some folks with a very massive 1 million square foot facility. You see some folks building in smaller, more frequent node sizes, 250,000 square foot a pop. But instead of you have some staggering so that you're building one building, you get about a quarter of the way through, the next building starts, you get a quarter of the way through, the next building starts. So at some point you're building all 4 buildings. So you're really still building 1 million square foot at the same time. So I would say the scale is the first challenge, right? The scale is absolutely massive. That in turn comes with speed. Speed to market, whether it's for revenue generating facilities or AI facilities. Revenue generating facilities, pretty straightforward. They want to make money as fast as possible. So we have to deliver those finished spaces as fast as possible. Or on the AI side, right now, this whole world is pursuing AI and trying to be able to figure out how this tool can benefit society as a whole. And with that comes speed to market, right? We need to get those servers online and running so that, AI can continue to grow and increase its, output. And those speed and scale, I would say the top thing we're seeing right now in pre-construction is labor availability. Materials, commodities, we're not seeing anything nearly as challenging as what we saw during 2020 with COVID and coming out and, trying to get, materials to site. We do have some long lead times and that'll always be a challenge, but the labor availability is the real big challenge right now. So finding trade partners that have not only the available labor, the experienced labor, the qualified labor, we're seeing a lot of increase in price due to that. Whether it be, hey, if you need this many individuals, well, they're going to be inexperienced because of the market demand. We need to increase or decrease our labor efficiencies, causing the labor price to go up. Or we see a lot of incentives in the marketplace trying to recruit labor from outside the region and bring them in. So it's been a really, really, really tough challenge, and you have to kind of strike a delicate balance on managing costs with the client, but also managing that speed and scale and saying, hey, if you really do want to build that fast, it's going to cost more than what we've seen in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. And is that the reason for, because I've seen them both models where they just go on, they just blast out 1 million square foot, but the 250,000 square foot 4 times, is that because of the labor? They can literally go from one project to the next rather than just getting the vast amount of people that it would require to do 1 million square foot?
Yeah, that's a strategy, and it's a strategy we advocate for. So you can have crews that, learn and build on the first building and then move that crew from building to building and have consistency of leadership and quality workforce. Now, at certain points, you're going to have a peak where you have, 1,000 electricians on the site. But if that core group of, let's just say, 250 electricians is there from start to finish, they're the first ones there, they're the last ones out. That helps you scale out that maybe some of that labor that is more inexperienced, more at the apprentice level, or coming in from outside the region. But if you have that core base of labor, that's really, really beneficial for the health of the campus and the health of the build. It creates a kind of a tribal knowledge on the job site, and and that can be taught down to the folks that are coming in out of the apprenticeships or out of state, or however else they're getting that labor to fill that gap.
And Mike, this is me thinking out loud. So see the first 250,000 square foot piece of this campus, would that go live before you get on to the second, third, and fourth?
So the depending on exactly the speed, but what I would say is you would have your first portion of the building go live probably very early on in the process of the second building. But there will be points where you're wrapping up the last portion of the first building going live. You're in the middle of going live in the second facility, and you're just starting to go live in the third facility. So you have this really, really intense overlap between the facilities where you're looking to finish up commissioning and close out one building. You're in the middle of it in the next building, and you're just getting started on the third building, which that's really where the challenge lies. That's your peak. That's your biggest stress point in a whole different, many different ways. So.
Brilliant. Love the challenges. And you mentioned there about electricians. It seems like to me, and just thinking about the labour side on the pre-construction and estimating side, that the mechanical electrical piping is the most difficult to get right, specifically electrical. You hear some crazy figures, 45% of the project could be electrical package. Is that just purely because of the vast size? I mean, how is the electrical packages so big? Or is it just because of the advancement in these data centers?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a lot of it has to do with the redundancy of systems, right? So if you have one electrical lineup with a generator, a switchgear, transformer, UPS, whatever the particular infrastructure for that facility is, you have a second, and sometimes a third or fourth, depending on the redundancy that's built into the design. And so it takes, and then, based on the schedule, you not only have to build those lineups, you're not building them sequentially, you're building them in parallel. So that means you have to scale that workforce up. So there's just a lot of individual activities that require a really heavy workforce and high labor count on electrical, and therefore high dollar value on electrical. Now, I will say we're with the AI systems and some of the chip innovations coming out of NVIDIA and some other folks, we are seeing some changes come into effect in the industry on the mechanical side, and that is the liquid to chip. A lot of different designs are rolling out now across many different clients with that liquid to chip design, and with that comes a lot more mechanical piping, bigger chiller systems, much more involvement on the BMS and building control side. So we are actually seeing that HVAC, I'm going to call it, that head count, whether they're sheet metal, a pipe fitter, or controls, type low voltage individual, that composite crew size on our job sites is going up with time. So I envision a future here where they may not ever overcome the total amount of electricians on a project, but we are approaching a world where the mechanical side is going to compete directly with the electricians to be the highest headcount on projects, and with these liquid to chip systems where we are bringing in much more mechanical piping right to the server racks.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, for anybody who doesn't know liquid to chip, give us a quick overview of what that means.
Yeah. So at the highest, most dumbed down level, if you will, that's
the level I love speaking at. That's me all over, Mike. Keep it coming.
Yeah. So essentially, these new chip innovations that are coming out have such high processing capacity that they're consuming much more power. These server racks are consuming much more power than they used to be able to. With that comes heat. So traditionally, you'll see a lot of hot out containment, cold out containment, whatever the particular infrastructure is. That's what we see a lot of today. Liquid to chip actually brings chilled water right to the server rack, right to essentially typically a metal plate, on which the other side of that metal plate is the actual computer chip, and where we're trying to keep that particular server cool. You're bringing chilled water right to that plate. So that plate is cooling and directly cooling on the other side, the chip or the internal components of the server. And then that water keeps moving by, now obviously it's been heated as those coils heat up and heat energy transfers, and then it goes back to the chiller system where the water can let go of that heat and then return into the system again as chilled water. So you're essentially, we're finding that air is not enough, just blowing cool air over. It's not keeping the temps down as needed. So this liquid to chip design, really literally bringing chilled water to the rack, is the innovation right now. And actually, you talk to some people like Charles McCarthy and some of the people that have been in the industry for a while. This is actually rebooting to a technology that was used maybe 15 years ago in some of the earlier designs of the data center world. So, it's just being done at a much bigger scale now.
Yeah, it's all about timing, isn't it? You can have the best idea in the world, but just at the wrong time. Brilliant. That was a great explanation. Appreciate that, Mike. Let's talk now, and again, staying in mission critical, because there's a lot of people that ask me, listen, Gareth, how can I get to the next level of my career? How can I go from a project manager to a senior project manager, director, project exec, VP? Talk to me now about mentorship, because it's pretty evident that Charles, who is Chief Operating Officer of Mission Critical for Suffolk, has been a big influence. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned earlier that with our group and our growth, there's been a lot of verticals. And, something I always tell my direct reports, and something I learned from Charles as well as others at Suffolk, is to always, raise your hand and say, I'm willing to try this. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to step out of my comfort zone and take a risk. And as long as you give your 100% effort and your 110% effort, we're going to make sure, whether that's, Suffolk as a whole or Charles or other mentors in the group, we're going to make sure that you turn out okay, as long as you're trying your hardest. And that's really something I've learned a lot from Charles is that work ethic and not being afraid to step out of your comfort zone. That has been rewarded, obviously, with the growth and everything like that, but it's also rewarded with, I've always felt like I've had the guardrails and guidance from Charles to know that he's never going to let me or others within this group truly, I'm going to say, quote unquote, fail in the role that we're in. So, and that shows itself, in the ways he leads by example. He's one of the hardest working people I've ever met, and is constantly going above and beyond to support others and to support the group and to grow this group into what it is turned into today. Excuse me. It's in his, one of our core values here at Suffolk is caring. His caring levels are extremely high. He knows the people working, in his group on a personal level. And that's, from people that report directly to him to all the way down to, he meets a project engineer on a project site, he will remember the story that project engineer told. And I think that top to bottom connection is so important, because it's a motivator. It makes you want to keep working and keep, moving forward. If you don't have that motivation, this is a very tough industry that, mission critical aside, construction is a very tough industry to work in, and it's a high demand industry, and to make you feel like you're part of a team, part of a community, that's something that Charles has always brought to the table, and it really helps you get through the week to week and the day to day and all those challenges that you face.
Yeah, and it helps as well, Mike, that he is Mr. Data Center. I mean, work with Grunley, DPR, Mortensen, and now heading up at Suffolk. I mean, knowledge retention must be massive. You must be just sponging away at that knowledge. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that the technical expertise with Charles is it goes unspoken. He's had a really, really deep career in the mission critical space, has built many, many data centers, many marquee data centers around the country for marquee clients. And with that, with that experience, he's been able to obviously teach me the ins and outs of the industry and the technicals, from both the technical side as well as the business development, the pre-construction, the operations, how to manage a large project. I've learned a lot from him. And, with that, he's brought in a lot of different people to this group that, he's worked with in a past life and and has worked and delivered some really successful projects. Folks like, Dan Russell, one of our senior vice presidents here in the group, Kyle Anthony, another vice president, have worked with Charles in the past, and alongside Charles have helped, mentor me. And I've learned a lot from these people that have this vast, experience in the industry.
Love it. Love it. You can't have enough of those people around you. You're 100% right. And it looks as if you're surrounded by many. Now, let's talk, Mike, making the shift from ops to pre-con. How did that come about? And what have you learned in the last 8 months about pre-construction?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've worn several different hats, and, again, I mentioned earlier that I did an estimating rotation as part of the Career Start program. There was a time, I want to say about 2018, 2019, where I was brought on very early on a project and was managing the pre-construction GMP process for that project, getting it kicked off the ground from the very conception of the job that when we were awarded. So I had a little bit of pre-construction experience there, but when I was dating back to early 2023, I was in a position where I was wrapping up a project in California, talking with Charles about the next opportunity, talking with, Charles about moving home, having a little more time in the area here in Massachusetts that most of my family is located in. And, we looking forward, we saw that our group was going to continue to grow and that we needed to really reinforce the pre-construction group. So that's where the opportunity came up for me to take that job from senior project manager to really, senior pre-construction manager. And I actually joined our pre-con group in, I would say, early 2023, working, alongside our director at the time, and working kind of as his right-hand man, if you will, and really just absorbing that knowledge, diving fully into the pre-construction process where I'd seen bits and pieces of it before, but now really taking ownership of and frankly scaling, right? So, previously I'd seen one GMP. Now, I was challenging myself to oversee 2, 3, including RFPs, things like that. And then, we had some internal moves, and our former director is now on the West Coast, filling the same role due to a company need. And I had the opportunity to step up into the director role for Mission Critical. So 8 months ago, as you mentioned. So that came at a time of explosive growth for us. That's still ongoing. So it's been a journey, but I would say I've parlayed some of those previous experiences along with, a deep dive, starting last year into pre-construction, combined with, yet another opportunity for to step up into a role and try to challenge myself on something new.
Exciting times, Mike. Exciting times. And listen, I think I mentioned you before. I see the best operations people now that understand collaboration, understand communication, stepping into pre-construction and really making a big difference from their experience. So you're another perfect example of that. Now let's talk pre-construction tech, if you could, just to be final off. But we could sit here and talk all day, Mike. But let's talk pre-con tech, because everyone's tech stack's different. Talk to me about Suffolk's.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think tech is something that is very important to Suffolk. We actually just have a group at Suffolk called Suffolk Technologies, which functions as not only a sort of venture capitalist arm that invests in new technologies and brings them into the fold here at Suffolk as part of our standard operating procedures. I work a lot with Parker Butt in that group, and who is, someone that's a peer of mine who came in at about the same time. So constantly working with him to figure out what techs we can bring into pre-con that'll bring success over into operations. But one of the first and foremost techs that we use on a day-to-day basis at pre-con is Ediphi. Ediphi is a full estimating software where we have the ability to do conceptual estimates, utilizing a historical database of all project data from across all Suffolk historical projects of all types, all regions, dating back 10 plus years. It's got everything in there. So at any time I can pull historical unit pricing from those projects, apply it to a quantity, and essentially create my conceptual estimate. It has a tool to build out GCGRs and staffing. It has a tool to build out bidding templates, such as like leveling sheets, and it links directly to Building Connected, which is another big software in the industry. So we're able to really leverage this tool. And the piece that's the best part about it is developed in-house. I worked for the pre-construction manager at the time who developed the software. It started in Excel as a macro-enabled program. And when Suffolk realized that the macro Excel programs were really limiting the capacity, Suffolk invested and created Ediphi with that pre-construction manager, created a web-based platform that is now one of the most powerful tools in the industry. We use it at Suffolk. We kind of have a special level of access to the tool, but it is now being rolled out across the industry, and other GCs and trade partners are beginning to use it. And we even have clients using it as well. So it's a really powerful pre-construction tool that everybody, including myself and everybody that works on my team, including our VPs and project executives, they use it every day. It's really powerful.
Yeah, it's brilliant. We had Dustin Devan on, who obviously is a big part of it as well, and Michael Navarro. I mean, it's a great tool. I mean, there's some incredible tools out there, and it just makes your job and all the pre-construction managers and estimators out there, it makes their job a little bit easier. It takes away the heavy lifting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike is the individual that I worked with in pre-construction for 8 months way back when. But I was there at the very beginning of the tool being created, and got to kind of talk with Mike and keep in touch with him as the product has really exploded and become a central core to what we do. And again, I go back to my conversation about Suffolk Tech as well. We're demoing and working with many different software companies right now. We're working with a company that is able to create early workforce assessments in the market. So, hey, new client X wants to see if it's feasible to build in new region Y. We're able to partner with this tech, or we're demoing this tech that can go into that market using an AI tool and essentially creates a labor score for that market. Hey, is this a market that does have available labor, or does it not? Is it a market that's going to require outside forces? So we're trying to figure out how we can use tools like that to help advise our clients, as well as help advise ourselves when we get pulled into these regions. Hey, what kind of region is this going to be? Do we have to go into our phone book of national contractors, or do we need to establish a ground game, go travel to this location, meet with the people in the market? So, we're always on the forefront of trying out new techs and figuring out how we can, really gain a competitive edge across the industry, but also a helping edge internally, because, standing up a project in a new region is a challenge, and we see that more and more every day.
Brilliant. But what a great value-added service that is for your client as well, to be able to say, listen, I know you wanted to build X project at Y. What about building X project at Z? And this is the reason why. I mean, it's brilliant consulting, collaboration. It's proper value-added service. Is there anything else now? And I promise this is the last thing, Mike.
No worries.
Let's talk about scheduling again, because that fascinated me. I think you mentioned Donna's team. Tell me how closely you work with scheduling, and is it a joint venture? As in, are we going to see scheduling come under the pre-construction umbrella, or are you happy to keep them siloed?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we worked extremely closely with scheduling during the whether it's a competitive bid in the RFP process, or if we've been selected for the project during the GMP development process. So typically I have a pre-construction manager assigned to the project. Donna and her team have a scheduler. We actually have several scheduler planners within the mission critical group, but they get assigned to the efforts, and then we're all working hand in hand. So we're sitting down with the scheduler, with my pre-construction manager, with the superintendent for the project, with the project executive for the project. We're identifying early on what the risks are for the project, whether we have any templates from historical projects that we can use that fit this project. And then my pre-construction manager is going through they're kind of the first line of defense, if you will, on an RFP. So they're the first one to read the documents. They're the first one to get an understanding of all the scope and the risks and things like that. So when we have that initial schedule and kickoff meeting during the RFP or GMP process, they're really relying on them to highlight just exactly what our particular risks are. And then we can use the expansive knowledge of our scheduling and planners, of our superintendents, of our project executives to say, okay, we have risk here. How have we managed this on other projects before? How are we going to build a schedule that allocates the proper amount of time and resources to that risk? So it's really ends up being a collaborative process. And I would say it's, scheduling at Suffolk is really, I don't want to say it's its own silo, but it's truly its own dedicated group. It has its own dedicated resources, and it sits under both the pre-construction and construction umbrella and is a continuous aspect between the two. And I think that continuity is key, because you build and you can build everything on paper, and you can do everything during that RFP and GMP stage. But once you hit construction, that plan, whether it's an equipment delay or whatever it is, it's going to change. But if you have that strong foundation that you built during pre-con, it's going to help you during construction, right? So that's, I think, the biggest key.
Yeah, and I love the fact, because very, very often we come across mid-sized GCs only doing 400 or 500 million a year. They always find it very difficult when it's handed off from pre-construction to operations, that coming back up the stream, come back to pre-construction.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have a scheduler running alongside both all the time with all the information and all the timelines and the costs, and then it's the perfect person to navigate you through any equations.
Absolutely, and we. Whenever possible, that same scheduler that's assigned during the pre-construction process is there for the life of the project. So, that is a huge, that continuity again, same with the superintendent and project executive, right? You have those individuals that bring that knowledge the whole duration of the job. And I think that's really key. It lessens the amount of handoffs, it lessens the risk of that, knowledge gap that can sometimes happen in this industry when things get shuffled around. So, really that continuity is key, and that starts at the pre-construction process.
Love it. Shout out to all the schedulers out there. You're doing amazing. Listen,
absolutely.
Mike, this has been incredible. Really, really enjoyed the insight, not only to your own career in Suffolk, but also the mission critical industry and pre-construction and estimating. I want to thank you. Now, if there is anybody watching this, Mike, and they're thinking, you know what, I've got a follow-up question for Mike that I would just love to ping him a message. Where's the best place to get you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, message me on LinkedIn, and I check that pretty constantly. And obviously, if we want to continue the conversation outside of LinkedIn, I'll definitely contact you via email, phone call. We can set that up. But LinkedIn's easily the most, I would say, central place that could be reached, and we'll take the conversation from there.
Mike, I love it. Now, if anybody's listening, I will put Mike's LinkedIn profile, a link to that in the show notes below, so you can grab it there. Mike Mallon, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. Appreciate the time and appreciate the opportunity to speak about what I do every day.